What have you learned since being friends with Douglas? How's he impacted you or influenced you?
Well, Douglas is very, very disagreeable, and he enjoys combat. And that isn't something that really characterizes. I don't enjoy combat at all. I mean, part of the reason that it's perverse, I suppose, in some ways, part of the reason that I will engage in difficult conversations is because I don't want to have them forever. And so, one of the rules I had in my marriage, and it was a rule that my wife also was pleased to follow, was that if we have a problem, we're going to deal with it right now. And we're going to deal with it right to the bottom. And that's very unpleasant. But if you do it, sometimes you only have to do it once and the problem goes away. And then you don't have that bloody problem every day for the rest of your life. And sometimes it takes 20 times before it's fixed, before you've got to the bottom of things. And that can be very unpleasant. Douglas is very, very good at not letting people off the hook. He's very tough, and he's very good at defending himself. And there's a pitilessness about him that's extraordinarily admirable. It's a judicious pitilessness, and it's a dangerous game to play because there's another gospel realization, let's say, is the standards you judge other people by will be the standards that you yourself are judged by. And the reason for that is, well, how are you going to judge everyone else and not apply the same standards to yourself? Like, that's not going to happen because you become what you practice, and you'll turn the hostile eye that you turn on others, you will absolutely turn on yourself. There's no way around that. And so Douglas plays a dangerous game because he's very combative, but he's also extremely careful. He's very careful with his words. And he toured with me through Europe. I think we did 9 shows together. We split the Q&A. He did a little bit of.
So we've got some very interesting insight from Jordan Peterson here being interviewed by Chris Williamson and asking him, what did he learn from Douglas Murray in the times that they've, debated and times that they've been on tour together. And so he basically starts out by saying that, Douglas Murray seems to be very disagreeable and that he is more combative, has more of a combative nature than Jordan does. And I think that's true because if you've seen Douglas Murray, and I've watched a lot of his interviews and a lot of his debates, when he's sitting there on a panel, you can just see he's just ready to go. And when somebody says something that he doesn't like, you can just see with Douglas Murray, he'll have the finger going across his lips or tapping his cheeks, or you'll see his eyebrow actually, going, up and down his eye, where he's doing, so he's ready to get in there. Where Jordan seems to be more, back a little bit, but then it seems that Jordan is like in, I think, what is it, in jiu-jitsu, using the weight and the momentum of your opponent against himself. And so he takes the verbal sparring, but then he maneuvers in such a way that he can take it off and then go on the attack, where it seems that, Douglas Murray wants to get in there and, mix it up and let everybody know exactly his position. And he's just, he knows his position and he feels he's just absolutely right. Anyways, folks, we got so much more to do. Reaction to the Chris Williamson interview with Jordan Peterson. I'm your host of this podcast. My name is Dr. Nasir of the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show, where I give you my political prescription, my political punditry, my political perspective of what happens when you take culture, science, and politics, and they all come together. Let's get more to this interview because it's going to be really, really good. Let's get to it right now.
For my lectures, I really liked it. I thought it was great. It's been a privilege to get to know him. Super sharp, very cultured person, very witty. So he has a great sense of humor, which is also fun, which also is one of the things that makes him a very dangerous opponent in a debate, because not only does he have the facts at hand, like Bjorn Lomborg, but he's devastatingly witty and cutting. And it's fun to watch that. He's a master at it. So
it's interesting to think about the fact that all you need really in a live debate, I think I learned this from you and Sam ages ago. If you're doing a live debate now that's not a proper intellectual formatted opening remarks, so on and so forth, if you manage to get sort of 2 or 3 real zingers, you won. Regardless of the content. If you do 2 or 3 real zinger, whole crowd laughs, guess what? You got.
Yeah, well, the great public intellectuals have a vicious sense of humor. Right. And I mean, I also think that's why so many of the successful podcasters have been comedians. Well, at the ARC conference, I think Konstantin Kissin's speech was the overwhelming hit of the convention. I think it's got 600,000 views as of today, 650 on the ARC side and about 600 on his own channel. And Konstantin did a beautiful job of merging intellectual content with wit.
Well, the interesting thing about my live tour that I'm about to start doing, a bunch of my comedian friends have said to me, dude, I am so jealous of the tour that you get to do because no one's expecting you to be funny. If you manage to be funny 4 times in 90 minutes, you've killed. If I'm not funny 1 second, I'm a shit comedian.
Right.
So the bar is set. And obviously coming in with Konstantin's background of comedy means that he is able to be by far far and away way funnier than most public speakers, but doesn't get held necessarily to the same standards that he's not expecting to be one-liners all the time. One of the things that Douglas brought up when you guys were talking on stage that I thought was particularly interesting was the perils of smart people getting captured by culture wars bullshit. Do you ever think about how much time over the last decade some of the smartest people on the planet have had their attention, their cognitive horsepower just taken away, arguing about whether men are men and women are women or not, or whatever the idea du jour of the day is.
Yeah, well,
just
this
how
is
much
something
time's been lost.
So I've been partnering with the Daily Wire for about a year and a half so far, and that's been very successful. They've been a pleasure to work with. But what they wrestle with constantly, all of the principles at Daily Wire would rather in some real way be concentrating on philosophical, theological, or dramatic matters. So which is partly why the Daily Wire is turning towards entertainment for kids, but also for adults, starting to make movies, for example, and TV shows. They'd rather be doing that. I had Ben Shapiro. He participated in this seminar on Exodus that I produced with about 9 other extraordinarily interesting thinkers. And Ben just shone, he's wasted. Is he wasted on the political? The political's necessary, but it's one nation under God for a reason, because
I've just got to add my 2 cents in here. I just feel compelled to do so. This is my podcast. When Chris asks Jordan the question that smart people or intelligent people are sort of taken in on this cultural Marxist bullshit of transgenderism, climate change, LGBTQIA plus MOUSC, I mean, all the Green New Deal, all of these. And he asked him the question, how is it that these people who are supposed to be smart, the most intelligent among us, right? The most well-bred, the most well-taught, went to the finest schools and institutions, drink their tea, sipping with their pinky. I mean, how is it that they're taken in? And I think, my opinion is that some of them, even though that they're smart or book smart, they're not common sense smart. And for some of them, they do get taken in. Just like any of us could be taken in on any subject matter or anything out there. And, we could be taken in because we let our guard down. Then there are others out there that I believe are doing it knowing full well that it's just a bunch of bullshit, a bunch of crap, but they're able to manipulate it for their means. So if they need to get more power, if they need to get more money, if they need to get more whatever it is that's going to help them or their situation or the institution or the company or the corporation or the think tank or whatever it is that they work for, that they'll be able to manipulate people and at the same time be able to, grab a piece of that, I guess, cultural, pie, so to speak, and use it to their advantage. They certainly are going to use it to their advantage. And that's where you see these race hustlers like Reverend Al Sharpton. And then you see people like, Jesse Jackson, although right now to probably a lesser extent, but Al Sharpton, absolutely. Now, when you take a look at people like maybe, Greta Thunberg, or maybe like this Phoebe, I forget her last name, but the one with Just Stop Oil, I think these are just impressionable young people that they feel a sense of duty, a sense of calling, but it's misguided, it's misplaced. Somehow they just think they're doing the right thing, but they can't think enough ahead. They can't rationalize that what they're talking about, what it's actually going to do, because they're in the moment right now. They're not thinking about that what would literally happen if they decided and just cut off oil just like that. Or if they just cut energy off just like that. So I think those are the two kinds of groups of people that you have. Those that want to manipulate the system, those that want to, foment distrust, foment division among people for their own gain. And those people that are just, they might be book smart, but they're just plain stupid if they're believing some of this crock of crap that's coming down the pike. Anyways, let's continue more with Jordan and Chris.
Never. It's never the pinnacle. And if you're capable of discourse at the pinnacle, political discourse is secondary.
Well, there's also,
and it's also evanescent, right?
There's ways that it can tumble as well. There's, how would you say, degrees of depth of political stuff too. Because what works on YouTube a lot of the time is reacts to insane woke TikToks
exactly,
or does whatever.
Exactly. And it's easy to get pigeonholed that way. Yeah. And is it a waste? Unoptimal.
But it's an interesting question to be asked, right? About how much sort of ankle or skirt or knee do you need to show from an algorithmic perspective in order to keep the numbers churning? Because ultimately you're producing what people click on. You don't want to be completely beholden to your audience. That's audience capture.
Yeah.
But you also don't want to be so unaware of having your finger on the pulse of what is trendy that you become obscure and obsolete.
Right. Well,
when they talk about this audience capture, look, I know these guys have got their podcasts. They've got millions of views, millions of subscribers or whatever. But when I look at audience capture or guest capture, I think you should be playing to your audience, but because your audience is it's the people that made you. It's the people like yourselves that are watching my show, watching other shows. You're the audience that's out there. And we want to cater that audience. And the only way you can cater to that audience is to do things that you feel you want to talk about and that you feel your audience needs to know about or that they would like you to talk about or they would like to be involved. That's what you're trying to do. And if it's that communication, and your audience is going to tell you. When you do the videos, when you do your podcasts, comments, questions, views, clicks, you're going to find out, oh, you know what? That subject matter, I really like that subject matter, but it just seems like, the audience just doesn't react to it. And then there may be some other subject matter that you sort of say, okay, you know what? It's a trendy story. It's out there right now. We got to go ahead and cover it, do our reaction to it or do, a piece on it. We'll do it. And it may not be something that you're looking at, but it's in the news at that moment. And then you take a look and, the views and the clicks are astronomical and you go, wow. And so I think that's just normal. So I think audience capture should be a big part of what you're doing, as well as guest capture. You want to get all kinds of guests, but you know what? You can't force somebody to come on the show. You can't force somebody to say, this is what you want to, talk about. You've got to make those decisions yourself and then see where it leads to after you've done it. What happened when you did that story? What happened when you did that video? What do you feel? Did you react to it properly? You know, what were the reactions back and forth? Did you get a lot of comments? What happened? I think all that makes for, you know, whatever it is that's going to make, you know, your videos, your podcasts and other things, you know, successful or not.
And
It's this
that
balance.
Well, and that line that you're trying to walk when you're dealing with matters that are the highest and also making
Exactly.
them publicly accessible, that's a very, very tight line to walk. I mean, Jonathan Pajot has done a good job of that, although his market is still relatively niche, and he certainly is more esoteric, let's say, than the Daily Wire guys who tend to devolve into the political, and that devolves into the cheap political from time to time, right? The hit for hit's sake, or the chasing the algorithm. And I mean, that's the danger that all politicians have too, is that, and I've seen this with lots of political types who have developed a persona. This is particularly true in the United States, I would say, because Americans are so salesman-y. And I don't say that dismissively. It's really hard to sell,
So
to market,
true.
to communicate. I saw the Elvis movie recently, and I thought it did a beautiful job.
And that's one reason why Trump is so great, because he is a salesman. He is able to sell. He sells Trump. He sells America. He sells greatness. He sells a vision. You may not agree with that, but he sells it to millions and millions of people.
Job of laying this out, because Elvis was a stellar talent, but his manager, who was a real shyster, was also a stellar talent. Like, Elvis wouldn't have been who he was without his corrupt manager. And, you know, it's sort of a deal with the devil, but you have to give the devil his due too. And the salesman-y part of American culture can easily devolve into a kind of narcissistic manipulativeness. That's where it would go if it becomes pathological. But as you said, you have to be aware of your audience, and you have to be delivering what
Yes.
there's a market for. And it's very difficult to get those things right.
We'll get back to talking to Jordan in 1 minute, but first,
Just another great insight into an intellectual mind like Jordan Peterson, talking about, you know, what he feels about other intellectual minds such as Douglas Murray, and then basically also going into the fact in terms of, like, you know, what it is that, you know, how it is that when you're speaking to an audience, when you're, you know, talking about various subjects, you know, that fine line, I guess, of where does journalism cross into entertainment, where does entertainment, you know, cross into, you know, culture, where does culture, you know, circle back to entertainment. And, you know, you've got this whole thing back and forth, and to find out, you know, where does your audience matter in that? They were talking about audience capture, guest capture, you know, those kind of things. So very, very interesting. Hope you enjoyed it. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your host, Dr. Nasir. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel, like, share, and follow us. Let us know what you think. Follow our links above and below to our other videos. And I'll leave you with my final thought, which is, when you're right, and when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.